Hi everyone. Thanks for joining either this morning or this evening or this afternoon. It's Andrew Pitts here, and I'm the founder of Polynode, and we also have Mark Smith on the call as well. Mark, do you want to say hi?
Sure. Hello. This is Mark Smith from the Social Media Research Foundation.
Thanks, Mark. So we've got about 90 minutes here. We might have a few latecomers, but I think now's a good time to kick off. And so what I wanted to do was to start off with, hopefully everyone should be able to see my screen, is to go through just a few slides to begin with. So here's an overview of how Mark and I wanted to use these 90 minutes. So to start off with, we want to provide a little bit of context. So rather than jumping straight into a demo, because I know there will be some people on this webinar who have used Polynode before, and some people on this webinar who have used NodeXL before. And I'm sure there'll also be some people that may not have used either Polynode or NodeXL before. So before jumping into a straight demonstration, which is what we want to spend most of the time on, Mark and I wanted to give a bit of an overview with a handful of slides on both Polynode and NodeXL. And then Mark is going to share his screen. So we're going to be handing the microphone across to each other a couple of times. And he's going to give a bit of an orientation and a demonstration of the integration that recently went live between Polynode and NodeXL. And then he's going to hand it back to me, and I'm going to use some of the data that he's generated in NodeXL to demonstrate Polynode. So we're going to be passing data back and forward. So he's in San Francisco and I'm in Sydney. And so not only will we be passing the screen share back and forward, but also some data as well. And then at the end, we've got some, we hopefully will have some time for some Q&A and discussion. What I would say is if you can remain on mute, so everyone should be on mute as they enter the conference. If you could please remain on mute throughout the webinar, and if and when you have questions as we go, please feel free to type them in the chat box. And then when we have the time at the end, we will try to answer those as best as possible during that period. So let me start off then with a high-level overview of what Polynode is. So basically, Polynode is a web-based platform. So it's all in your browser for visualizing and analyzing and also collecting any type of network data at all. And so there's really two tools within Polynode. The first is Polynode Networks. And what Polynode Networks allows you to do is to upload any network data at all. So any selection of nodes or edges with any combination of categorical or numerical attributes can be uploaded in your browser. And crucially, because it's browser-based, it can then be shared with other people. And they don't need to download an application or anything like that. So that's what Polynode Networks is. And surveys, so surveys gives you the same ability to explore networks, but rather than uploading existing data, what the surveys tool allows you to do is to collect data by asking relationship-based questions. So it's often used for organizational network analysis to ask questions like, who do you work with often? Who do you go to for advice? Any types of questions like that. And the outputs of the surveys are interactive networks that you can explore. And so that's the commonality between networks and surveys, is they both have a unified interface for interactively exploring networks. And so a little bit more detail on Polynode Networks. And today we're not going to be covering Polynode surveys because this is all about the NodeXL and Polynode integration, which is really about the networks piece. So as I said, Polynode Networks allows you to upload, analyze, and crucially collaborate on any set of network data. It's 100% web-based. And because it's browser-based, it allows you to add people with different levels of permission in order to collaborate on those networks. So if you're a consultant, you can add a client with view-only permission, for example. You can upload networks using Excel or also more advanced formats. And as of a few days ago, you can also upload networks directly from NodeXL Pro as well, using the API. You can export into a number of different formats, so Excel, PNG, SVG, or more advanced formats such as Graph Exchange format or GraphML. You can create, save, and share multiple views in Polynode. So a view is like a set of settings. So what are you sizing by? What are you coloring by? What are you filtering by? All your different colors, what metrics are you calculating? That's what a view is. And so every network in Polynode can have multiple views associated with it. There's also built-in network metric calculation. So there's 20 different metrics, all the familiar ones like in degree, out degree, total degree, betweenness, eigenvector centrality. They're all available within Polynode. There's also multiple layout algorithms. We'll have a look at that in the demo, and API access as well. And on the right-hand side, you can see some of the example data sources, the kinds of organizational data sources that you can use to put data into Polynode. And because of the integration with NodeXL, and because NodeXL is very good at importing data from sources like Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, etc. It's now straightforward to import data from those sources as well. Polynode surveys, I won't spend too much time on this because we really want to emphasize the networks here, but it's a highly flexible tool, so it's built-in survey functionality. So you can ask any question. There's multiple different types of survey questions, each with multiple options. So, text questions, numerical slider questions, matrix questions that allow you to construct Likerts. Crucially, all questions can be relationship questions or regular questions. And a relationship question is what produces the interactive networks, like what you see in the diagram there. You also have all the benefits of networks in the sense that you can explore a network. So you can explore the relationship data that you collect with a single click. It's all integrated. There's no need to export and manually manipulate your data. You can also import arbitrary attributes. So if you're running a survey, you can, if you're running it in an organization, you can add attributes like gender or division or tenure or whatever you like. A slider question type is nice because it allows you to measure relationship strength. And there's also question piping. So you can ask a question like, who do you work with often? And then pipe those responses to subsequent questions where you can measure relationship strength and the type of relationship, etc. And there's some advanced functionality as well, which allow you to do things like snowball surveys. So you don't necessarily need to know all of the nodes in your network before you start collecting data with Polynode surveys. So who uses Polynode? So there's really 5 different types, if you will, of users. So enterprises, consultants, researchers, not-for-profits, and students. There's a lot of different and interesting use cases that people use it for. So there's quite a few users, and you'll find some nice public networks available on Polynode as well. And then what Mark and I wanted to do at the outset as well is because I think a lot of fairly frequent question is about pricing, and so we wanted to preempt all your questions about pricing with a very simple summary. And of course, if you have additional questions about anything, including the pricing, we're always happy to answer that either online at the end of this webinar or separately later. But in Polynode, there's really 4 different things, right? So there's public networks, which are the networks that you upload, as I was talking about before, but that are publicly available to everyone. There's private networks, which are networks that you upload, but only you have access to and people that you grant access to. There's surveys, which I just spoke about, which are relationship-based surveys. And then there's consulting as well. And so what's the pricing for each of those? Well, public networks, depending on the size of the networks that you upload, are either free or $20 per month. Private networks start at $30 per month for one private network, and then become cheaper on a per network basis as you have more private networks. And surveys are $3 per respondent, or as we say, $3 per respondent credit. And consulting is, well, it's dependent on scope and the nature of the consulting, but particularly for anything kind of data heavy or technical, and also for organizational data, like some of the data sources that I was talking about before. If you have any kind of needs like that, that's also something that we're always happy to chat to people about. So that's a bit of a summary of Polynode. What I might do now is stop sharing my screen and hand it over to Mark.
Hello. Let's see. And I'll just check if everybody can hear and if that's visible.
Yep, I can hear you, Mark, and I can see that.
Very good. Well, hi, I'm Mark Smith. I'm from the Social Media Research Foundation, and I work with the NodeXL team.
One thing, Mark, I can't see the whole slide there, so I can see one large.
Right, yeah. I'm about to bring in some the browser from the side. So the Social Media Research Foundation produces a tool known as NodeXL. NodeXL is the network overview, discovery, and exploration add-in for the familiar Excel spreadsheet. And using NodeXL, our goal is to make networks about as challenging as pie charts. And so if you can currently make a pie chart, you probably can now make a network chart. We're also very excited to now announce that NodeXL is capable of export to Polynode, which gives us a certain amount of flexibility in terms of how we present our data to users. So currently, you can go into NodeXL and we present you with a new ribbon, a new menu here. And using that menu, you can get data, analyze data, visualize it, and publish it to a variety of endpoints. Import from a variety of social media platforms and of course other data sources allows NodeXL to consume network data from a wide variety of endpoints. There is a NodeXL Pro data import menu. If you click that menu, you're presented with these and the potential for other third-party importers to be added. And when you select one of them, you'll be asked a series of questions and configurations. And the result will be to deliver network data into a spreadsheet, into our workbook format. And we'll take a look at that live in just a second. And I'll note, if you have a suggested topic that you would like us to use today, perhaps it's a Twitter hashtag or query term, we can use your suggestion in the chat, and it'll be coming up in just a few moments. So if you have some suggestions for a topic or a hashtag to map, we'll be taking those suggestions and using them as part of our demo in just a little bit. So in the importer, you're asked really a series of very basic questions. What would your query term be? How elaborate would your network be? And how much data can we get for you from a particular endpoint? It is worth noting all of the various social media platforms place a range of constraints and limitations, data throttling rules that often mean that you cannot get as much data as you like. On the other hand, their free and open APIs still give you a lot more data than you might imagine. And for many topics, or for diligent users, there's often quite a bit of data there before you have to go to the commercial data providers. There are a few caveats, particularly when you're uploading your data from NodeXL into Polynode. You might want to remove certain attributes to streamline your data. We, in the NodeXL application, bring in as many columns of metadata as the endpoint will provide us. You may not need them all, and you may want to remove some of the images. So some data handling tips are included in the application. And just to follow up with Andrew's point about pricing, you can get NodeXL either monthly or annually. And we offer different rates for corporate or commercial users, academic, nonprofit, and personal users, and student users get a substantial discount. And new, we've added a monthly subscription for commercial users. So if you'd like to just try us for a month, that's now an option. So let's take a look at a live demo. Let's take a peek at what it looks like when you actually do some Polynode. First, I'd like to take you here to the NodeXL Graph Gallery. This is the place where we publish a lot of our networks. And in many cases, this publication is just a still image. You can drill into one of these network graphs, but there's still basically a static image. You get a report with a lot of information about the data set underneath it. That's true. But for many applications, you would like to collaborate around this data. And you might want to do that in a platform like Polynode. And so here we're seeing data from NodeXL that's now been published into Polynode. And in this case, we now get the ability to mouse over, select, zoom, pan, move nodes around. You've got a long browser here for data about each of the connections for each person, as well as the attributes of each individual that you might select. So how did we do this? Well, it's easy. Let's go get some NodeXL, and here we are. This is NodeXL, and it recently completed a data import. We went and asked Twitter for some data. This was where we went. We went to the Twitter search network importer, and we asked it for as many tweets as it would give us that contained the word Polynode or NodeXL. And we got the basic network, and we did not add the who follows who information because this is information that is remarkably throttled. It's very slow. And we could have a debate about whether or not it's as valuable as we'd like it to be. But getting the basic network, we can get up to about 18,000 tweets, so long as they are within the last 7 or 8 days. These are all the rules of Twitter. If you want data that's older than about 7 or 8 days, you have to take a trip to a data vendor, let's say like Twitter itself, or there's Crimson Hexagon or Salesforce Marketing Cloud. These are all great sources of archival data. Of course, we do recommend that you bring a very large checkbook with you. They're kind of steeply priced. We try to make do with whatever you can get from the public API, and the public API is free. So what did it deliver to us? It gave us a collection of edges from Twitter based on the analysis of each tweet. We collected some thousands of tweets, and here is a tweet. And what we're looking for is information about who said what or who mentioned who replied to who. And each of these tweets has been analyzed and turned into an edge. And these edges were then analyzed into the form of a network. These are all of the individual nodes in that network. And we can then visualize that network and see that it comes in clusters, that certain people are more prominent in the network than others, that each of the groups is in some ways devoted to slightly different aspects of the topic, because we have words here, and these words or hashtags are the hashtags that are representative of the cluster in question. So we have different clusters or groups, and each one is using language slightly differently, different hashtags, words, word pairs, and so on. A lot of that information is stored over here, where we're going to give you a column of information about each of the groups in the graph and what hashtags, domains, and URLs, what words, word pairs, and so on are used in each of those groups. So one useful thing is to look across the top here and to see what are the top hashtags used in different clusters. And it's worth noting that they're not always the same, that different neighborhoods within a network are often having a conversation that's related to the same topic, but features it in different ways. So the NodeXL network is a rich workbook, but one of the challenges is that it's kind of locked here on your desktop. It would be nice if we could share this. And Polynode is one of the most advanced canvases out there for sharing information about a network. And so I have a public key and a private key, an account with Polynode. And I'll note that NodeXL has pre-populated a title and a description, and it's asking me whether or not it would like this to be public or private. I'm going to make this one public, and I'm going to say OK. And we're now going to start a process of uploading this network. And this network was the network of people who said recently either the word NodeXL or Polynode. So we can now come back to Polynode. And if I refresh my account, actually, Andrew.
You won't have it because it's in my account now.
Yeah, it's in your account. Yeah, it's public. But you could share that URL with me, and then maybe in the chat, and then I will navigate to that. How's that?
Well, what I was thinking is I would take people through the.
Oh yeah. Okay. There you go. You want to pick up at this point. Let me give you that, and I think I do that. I'm going to figure out how to do that.
If you
I just stop a share. There we go. And then I believe you can now start to share your screen.
Yeah, let me try that. Okay, so I should be back sharing my screen. So
yeah, I see you.
Now, and now we find the network here that Mark just shared with everyone. So this is the Polynode or NodeXL Twitter SNA map and report. So I might just give people a bit of an orientation around Polynode, and then dive straight into that network. So you know, when you log into Polynode, and this is a demo account, so you'll see it's called Polynode Demo. When you log into Polynode, you first get a dashboard that says, you know, how many networks and how many surveys you have, and under networks, here's the list of our networks. And then we also have surveys, and we have Discover. And you know, an important point that Mark was making before about, you know, the difference between public networks and private networks, and that I also touched on in the overview, is that, you know, private networks are available only to yourself and to people that you share, you know, that you give permission to access those networks, whereas public networks are available to everyone under Discover. So, you know, if we go to Discover, we've got, you know, some hand-picked networks, and then we also have some recent networks that people have uploaded. And you can see that the most recent public network that was uploaded in Polynode is this network that Mark just uploaded. And so I think it's important to just to talk about, you know, the difference between public and private networks just for a minute. And so if I click now on Explore, this is going to open up the data that Mark just uploaded. So you'll see that this looks very similar to the layout that you would have seen in NodeXL. And so what NodeXL does when it communicates with Polynode is, by default, it transmits essentially all the information that has been collected by NodeXL, which is quite a lot of information in terms of the attributes. And it also gives you this default description, which you can edit as well. So here, the description, reads, this graph represents a network of 267 Twitter users, and it just tells you, the period that it was collected over, what the edges represent, the fact that this is a directed graph, that the graph's vertices were grouped by clustering using the Closet-Newman-Moore cluster algorithm, and how the layout of the graph was actually computed. And so if we hide that description, Mark just touched on this very briefly before in terms of opening up a Polynode network, but I want to spend a little bit more time just kind of orientating everyone on how do you interact with a network in Polynode. And so you can zoom in and out like so with your mouse. You can click on a node or hover over a node. So if we hover over this node here, so Reinhard Stempel, we can see all the attributes, and these include all the attributes that NodeXL collected and also calculated for this network as well. So NodeXL pre-calculates for the whole network the in degree, the out degree, the betweenness centrality, the closeness centrality. And if we click on Reinhard and we scroll down, we can see all the different things that NodeXL collects and provides to Polynode. And one of the nice things about a web application is that you can connect into other parts of the web. And so we've used here, in terms of the integration, the markdown functionality in Polynode. So you can see that there's a web link here. And so if we click on this web link, it will open up the link that is the link for this particular Twitter user as part of their Twitter profile. And so we can also right-click to clear. We can search as well in this network. So if we start typing someone's name, we can select them. And also, as Mark showed you, you can easily see just by clicking on the edges, where are the in edges and where are the out edges. And if you click on an out edge, it will navigate to that out edge. And so you can click around using the right-hand side menu here. And drag your network around as well. But where I want to spend most time is on the left-hand side toolbar here. So what you want to do when you kind of first open Polynode generally, and as you're getting used to all the different things that it can do, is you want to expand this left-hand side toolbar so it has a name next to each one of these items. So we have layout, open, save, lightning, labels, layers, metrics, color, size, filter, roll up, reports, export, themes, settings, and collapse. And so what are each of those things? Well, to begin with, the layout allows you to basically position nodes, and I know many of you will know how different layouts work, but the default layout in Polynode is the force-directed layout, and essentially it runs call it like a simulation of physical forces that positions nodes relatively close to each other when they're relatively closely connected. So there's also some advanced options here. And so if we reset this network, for example, we can see, and I know there's going to be some isolates, so I'm going to run this with strong gravity. You can see how in Polynode you can rerun the layout. So NodeXL has given us one layout, but you can interactively kind of change the layout and run things in Polynode as well. And another nice thing about the integration is that the images have come across as well. So if we zoom in, we can see that the different Twitter profile images have been imported into Polynode. There's a few other kind of layout options here as well. So we've got force directed, we've got distribute nodes. So distribute nodes allows you to essentially create a margin between nodes, or if you have a larger network, so this is not as large a network, but if you have a large network, this allows you to get rid of the overlap between different nodes, or to enforce a margin between them. We also have a hierarchical layout, which gives you that kind of org chart type look. And plot nodes is this really powerful functionality, which allows you to move from positioning nodes in terms of X and Y coordinates to positioning nodes, so positioning nodes in X and Y coordinates is what plot nodes allows you to do. And so you can move from the layout, that the force directed layout, or that any of the multiple layout options in NodeXL allow you, which you can receive by importing that data into Polynode. You can move from those kinds of network layouts to a Cartesian type layout with X and Y axes by using plot nodes. And I might show you how you do that once I've shown you how you can calculate metrics. Now, in this network, we've got quite a few metrics calculated already that came from NodeXL. So we got betweenness, centrality, in degree, out degree. I know that there's a couple of differences in the way that metrics are calculated in NodeXL versus Polynode. It's basically you should get the same ranking, but there's normalizations that happen. I think there's a bunch of different ways of calculating some of these metrics, some of which are normalized and some of which are not. And so when you do see a difference, that's the nature of that difference. So that's layout. What's open and save? So open and save are all about views. So right now, this is a new network that Mark just exported into the Polynode demo account. So there's no views associated with this network. But a view is a set of settings, right, as I said at the outset. So you can size nodes, color nodes, filter nodes. You can change the background color, the color of nodes, the color of edges, all these things. And if you hit save here, once you've done that, and you call it a name, right, you can then come back to those settings later. So you can come back to that view. And one network can have multiple views associated with it. And again, because it's browser-based, you can share those views or those insights with other users as well. Lightning mode, if you have a large network, Lightning mode will hide the rendering of edges, and so will make it faster to interact with. With this kind of size network, it's not really necessary. Labels, so there's a lot of optionality in terms of labels. So by default, labels are only shown on selection, so when you left click, so here we see the labels. But if you want to see the labels for all the nodes, just change it to always, and we have all the labels. And then you can also filter those labels out, so you just see labels for example, nodes which have the highest centrality score, or something like that. You can also show labels when toggled only. And there's a lot of shortcuts in Polynode, keyboard shortcuts, which you can always access by hitting Shift and the question mark key. And that will show you the keyboard shortcuts. So here's a list of all the shortcuts, one of which is to toggle labels on and off. But there's a lot of kind of more advanced things that you can do with those keyboard shortcuts as well. But we'll change labels to on selection only, and you can change the attribute that is getting displayed as labels. You can change the position of the labels, the color, etc., etc. Now layers are important as well, and what layers? You can think of layers as kind of like PowerPoint, if you will. Photoshop. So layers are kind of like Photoshop in the sense that that you have different operations in Polynode. And so what is an operation? Well, an operation can be, for example, calculating a metric, or it can be, filtering by that metric or sizing by that metric. And what layers allow you to do is to stack those operations on top of each other and preserve that order. So we can say, calculate the in degree for these nodes, and then size by that, and then filter by this other thing, and then color by this other thing. And so we can stack these layers on top of each other and then preserve that as a view. So to recap, a single account can have multiple networks. A single network can have multiple views, up to 50 views. And a single view will typically have multiple layers. So, what metrics have I calculated? Then what am I sized by, colored by, etc. And so, what are the different layers? Well, the first one is metrics. And so we can calculate communities as an example of a metric. And we can also calculate, for example, let's do total degree as a metric. And you'll see on the right-hand side in this view layers section, we've added that as a layer as well, the metrics. There's also a bunch of advanced metrics in Polynode as well. I said there were 20 metrics. And there are things like, between the centrality, closeness centrality, page rank, cat centrality, and a bunch of advanced metrics. But for the purposes of this demonstration and this webinar, I'm just going to stick with what are called the basic metrics in Polynode, just to demonstrate it. And you can also color, right? So you can color nodes, edges, or labels, and that's another type of layer. So what are the layers? Well, the way that I like to describe it is, there are 11 different types of layers. The first is metrics, and then you have color, size, filter, and you can color, size, filter any of nodes, edges, and labels. And so that's 3 by 3, which gives you 9. And then the last one is filter. Is roll up. So you can roll up your network by any categorical attribute. So if we had a categorical attribute, which we do, like community here, we can roll up the network to create kind of like a rolled up or macro network where the nodes represent those categorical attributes. And so 11 types of layers: metrics, and then color, size, filter, each of nodes, edges, and labels, which gives you 9. So 9 plus 1 is 10. And then rollup is an 11th type of layer. So let's color these nodes by community, for example. Now, because we have images here, the color of these nodes is less obvious than it might otherwise be. But you can still see, particularly if we zoom in, that we have, for example, this green community here. We have this purple one here. And if we want to change the color, it's very easy to just click on the legend and change that to, for example, purple, and we've changed the color of that. And if we want to add this as a layer, just click Add as a Layer, and we've added color nodes by communities as a layer. We can also color edges, for example. So at the moment, we've got it as a custom color. I'm not sure that we have many attributes on these edges. Actually, we might. So let's have a look. So attribute. We've just got weight, which will just be equal to 1 on these edges. But if we did have attributes on these edges, we could color those edges by those attributes. We also can color labels as well. I won't show you that, but you have the functionality to obviously color those labels, which I showed you previously. You can size nodes, right? So you can size nodes or edges or labels by any numerical attribute. So here I'm going to size the nodes by that metric that I calculated previously, which is total degree. And now you can see that, not surprisingly, we have Mark Smith. So Mark, has in this network the largest total degree, and so you can also see the NodeXL project and connected action, analytics there, and Ronald Van Loon and so on. And we can add that as a layer as well. So now we're sizing nodes by total degree. You can also size edges. Again, if we had an attribute, a numerical attribute on the edges, we could size by that. And you can size labels. So you can size labels if we chose to add those labels. And we can filter. So we can filter nodes, edges, or labels as well. So if we filter, say, for example, by total degree, and we slide this up, we now are just showing those nodes with a total degree between 26 and 107. And if we want an exact value, we just click on that 26 number, the label, change it to 22, for example, and we can enter an exact number. And of course, we can add that as a layer as well. And if we want to remove a layer, we can just delete the layer, or if we want to edit it, we can just click on it and edit it, and then update it, like so. But let's delete this layer. And there we have all the nodes back. But I also want to show you, if we change the labels to always, and we go to filter, and we filter the labels by total degree, we're now showing labels just for those nodes which have a total degree greater than 45. So again, there's Mark Smith, Francois Morvan, NodeXL project, and analytics. And of course, this is a layer that we can add in if we choose. Roll up, I won't spend too much time on, but you can roll this network up by any categorical attribute. So here we could roll it up by communities if we wanted. Reports, so we have a report here which says, what is the name of this network, the fact that it's a directed network, the total number of visible nodes and visible edges, the average degree, the network density, and also an interactive kind of like Excel table which allows us to sort things. So we can choose our columns. So here we can choose, for example, total degree, fix the columns, and we can sort by total degree. And now we can see, here's Mark Smith, NodeXL projects, analytics, Francois Morvan up the top of this list, and we can compare them to other attribute values as well. And you can search here too. We also have a density table. So we can choose any categorical attributes. So for example, communities, to see the density of connections between these communities. Here we've got kind of a lot of communities, so it's more helpful to do it visually when you have slightly less, like if you have 10 divisions or 5 divisions or so. And you can export that data as well. So you can export a table of the density by attribute, for example. But you can also export in a number of different ways. So you can export as a PNG image or as an SVG image. You can export to an Excel file, to Graph Exchange format, to GraphML. So let me show you an example. If we export this to PNG, here's a copy of that PNG image. If we export to Excel, an important point, and this runs through all of Polynode, is that what will be exported is only the visible network, which is really helpful if we want to filter and find just the most influential nodes, right? So just the nodes with the highest, for example, eigenvector centrality or total degree, or however you want to measure influence in your network. You can filter to find those nodes and then export to Excel, and it'll just be those visible nodes and edges. And this is true as well for the metrics as well. So the metrics you can calculate interactively. So if you calculate a metric after applying a filter, that metric will just be calculated for the visible network only. So we can, for example, filter by location. So just those Twitter users that are located in San Francisco, for example, and then calculate total degree just for that subset of the network. And that will, the way we do that is by applying the filter in these layers before we calculate the metric. And so it's a really important point when you're interacting and working with Polynode is to understand that the metrics, the export of the Excel, and also the roll-up as well, and also the reports, all of those things are on the visible network only, which gives you flexibility to apply different filters before you, to apply filters so that you can look at subnetworks kind of interactively, if you will, and of course save them as different views. Themes is a nice feature as well. So, when I'm working with Polynode, I really like the dark background, but I know that a lot of people don't like the dark background. So there's a light theme. So if we click on light theme, you'll see that, all the colors of the labels, the legend, the background, everything's changed to be light. But I prefer the dark theme. So here we are back with the dark theme. So you can change your themes with a single click. You can also create your own themes. So that's really helpful if you're a consultant and you're working with a corporation and you want to replicate their corporate color scheme, or your own if you're an organization and you want to use your own color scheme. So you can save a new theme, you can update the theme. It's really flexible in terms of the colors there. Settings, there's a lot of different things that you can change, both visually and otherwise. Here we've got curved edges, but we can have straight edges if we want. We can activate edge hover, in which case we can see the attributes of the edges. Self loops we currently have. So Mark has a self loop. And so if we want to get rid of that, we can just select self loops as no. We can also show, at the moment we're showing all the edges, but if we change this, we can just show where is there a mutual connection, so a reciprocated connection, or where are the edges not reciprocated. So if we do show both mutual edges only, now we're just showing the edges in the network that are reciprocated, which is helpful for a bunch of different reasons. Legend, we can show or hide legends, change the colors, selection, you can change the way that you select things. Other, you can change the background color yourself if you so choose. You can also rename communities, and there's a bunch of advanced options in here as well that allow you to kind of override a few things and change, for example, when you're sizing the ceilings and the zoom ratio. Some of these things are more advanced. So they're a little bit hidden, but if you ever need them, it's important to know that they're there. So that's a general overview of Polynode. Now, Mark, I know you didn't get an enormous amount of time to demonstrate some of the things, some of the other things that I think would be great to see in NodeXL. Would you like to go back and show a few other things in terms of NodeXL? Now I've given an overview of Polynode and the network that you exported.
Well, I made a new map and it's in Polynode now under your account, which is
you've created another one.
I made another one, yeah. So this one's the union. This was the disjoint set of either NodeXL or Polynode. This is now NodeXL and Polynode.
Oh, terrific! And you made this a private network? I see.
That was a mistake.
Oh, I thought it was a great example of demonstrating.
There you go. That was an oversight.
Okay.
Can you change it? I bet you can.
What was that, sir? Yes, I could change it. Yes.
You could change it from private to public. Yeah. So this gives you a sense of, it is the sub network of the unity. It's not the or, it's the and.
Mm-hmm.
So as you can see, I think what the two applications do well together is NodeXL gives you a bridge to a variety of additional data sources. It does have some analytic features that don't overlap and then are therefore complementary. So some of our content analytic features, for example, are sentiment features and time series. So those things that Polynode doesn't have, NodeXL does, and the things that NodeXL doesn't have, Polynode does. Together, they seem to form a complete protein in that there is almost nothing you can't do in terms of getting, analyzing, visualizing, and critically securely sharing a network with a collaboration team. And I can think of many applications in which being on the same page, being able to share the same network map is a significant competitive advantage. We like to say at the Social Media Research Foundation that our goal is to help people think link, to bring network thinking, network consciousness into the business decision-making world. And in order to do that, I think we really need to turn network into a business practice, a data structure that businesses use to reason about their decision making. And in order to do that, it really needs to be the case that networks can appear on any tablet, any phone, any screen, any Mac, any PC, almost anywhere, so that people can gather around connected structures to share insights and to develop strategies based on those insights. So much of our world is made out of a network, and so little of those networks are visible to the people making decisions that are going to be affected by where they are in the network and what the general overview or shape of the crowd as a whole is. So let's see, would you, I guess we could take a quick look at another topic. Any topic requests from our users?
Let's see, I think we might have a few questions as well. So maybe we can see whether there's, it seems like Polynode is an SNA app like Gephi that enables NodeXL data to be used in many different ways. Is that right? So yes, so there are a lot of similarities between what you can do in Polynode and Gephi, but hopefully, you know, with that overview, I think it's you know, there are also a lot of differences as well. So things like you know, the fact that the Polynode is browser-based gives you a lot of advantages. And you know, look, I mean, there are advantages to Gephi as well, if you want to make that comparison. So you know, Gephi has some nice things too. You know, if I had a million nodes, I might use Gephi rather than Polynode because you know, browser technology is still emerging and it's catching up very fast. But you will find with a million nodes, it's slightly faster in Gephi than Polynode. But yeah, there's a lot of similarities. But then Polynode, of course, also includes that integrated surveys functionality as well. Do you think that's a fair summary, Mark?
Yeah. Different tools for different applications. Gephi's a fine quality application that shares some technology with Polynode. I think the big advantage is that the browser host feature of Polynode really means that networks travel pretty much to every nook and cranny of the internet, so pretty much any device. Whereas Gephi really wants you to be on a desktop, and it really would like you to be a Java developer if you could be. And so there are different tools for different use cases and user populations. And certainly there are times when you would prefer to use Gephi.
Yeah, definitely. But look, there's always ways of, you know, we've shown you an integration between NodeXL and Polynode. There's always ways of connecting dots and integrating different tools as well. But absolutely. Then can it be exported to JP image? So I showed you an export to PNG. The reason why I like the PNG image there, Daniel, is because of the transparency. And so there's a nice feature in Polynode is you can change the transparency of the background. So you can change the transparency of the background to 0, for example, the alpha. And that means that once you export the image with a transparent background, you can put it in a PowerPoint slide or over the top of a map or overlay it on something else with that transparent background. And so the PNG is nicer. If you want to use JPEG rather than PNG, you can always convert the PNG to JPEG as well.
And I think we have another question about how to use the Twitter data. Could I ask you, Andrew, to fire up one more tab And to answer that question, I'd like to point at the Pew Internet report that documented the different shapes of Twitter networks. And so if you just Google the phrase Pew Internet, that's one word, and then Node XL.
This one?
And that's the one. So the main thrust of this paper is visible at almost the very, very bottom of this page, the front page. It's figure 3 at almost the very bottom of the page, just above the footer. In this, yeah, all the way down. Yeah, keep going. In this report, we talk about how, yeah, it's figure 3 at the bottom.
There we go.
That's it. So all social media creates networks, but not all social media networks are the same. And certainly different platforms create differently shaped networks, but even the same platform is capable of generating diverse network structures. In this paper with Pew Internet, we gathered and analyzed over 1 million social media network maps and reports. And we came to recognize that there are a certain number of stable structures that occur and reappear in these data sets over and over again. We labeled those structures as polarized, unified, fragmented, clustered, and the in and the out hub and spoke pattern. And so to answer the question, how can an organization use Twitter data? When you collect Twitter data about a topic relevant to your business, perhaps it's the name of the business or the brand, or it's the name of the product, or it's the use case for that product. Maybe it's the name of the competitor or their products. When you make these maps, certain structures appear very visibly and clearly if they're present. Things like who are the leaders, who are the mayors of your hashtag. Those are the people with the highest betweenness centrality. But at a higher meta level, it's not just about individuals, it's about the overall shape of the crowd. And if you were hoping to create a community, but you got a polarized crowd, then you have work to do. You have bridge building to do. If you had hoped to build a brand, but you got a tight crowd, as is often the case, people are not satisfied with what they are. They want to be something else. But a network map of social media lets you recognize what you are or what you're in, and it also suggests what you might want to become. If you are one of these structures and you actually prefer to create a social environment that resembles another one, network metrics help guide you there. They tell you things like, how much density do you have? And I guess there's a question about how do we have any examples of people putting this to work? There are a lot of organizations now who will get these maps built and then, using a variety of features, engage the people in the middle, using the ability to identify influential people in network graphs by, for example, calculating betweenness centrality. And a general strategy then is to engage the people who are at the center of the graphs that matter to you. And if you do that carefully, because these are, after all, remarkably powerful people, but if you do build relationships with the people who are essentially in the positions of greatest centrality, it's the shortest possible path to prominence for your message. Essentially, network analysis of social media has allowed us to make a distinction between popular and viral. Not all things that are popular are viral, and potentially not all viral things are popular. We see it in network terms as a matter of how many different sources are propagating that piece of information. If something is popular, many people may have, for example, retweeted it, but it all came from one source, versus something that's viral, which might have the same number of people retweeting it, but they're retweeting it from dozens, if not hundreds of other people. And so this idea of virality versus popularity is something that only really makes sense in a network perspective. So yeah, there are a number of publications out there that suggest that navigating your way through the network, essentially moving towards the center by building relationships with people in the center, is one strategy. Another strategy is to think about the graph as a whole and to try to contribute to changing its structure so that it's more conducive to the goals you have. So let me say that in a more precise way. Let's just say you're looking at the brand clusters pattern. It's a pattern in which almost nobody talks to anybody. And in that pattern, you might want to create community. A network-driven approach would say your goal is to introduce people to each other, which is a rare pattern for social media engagement. I think there are very few brands that spend their effort introducing their brand fans to one another rather than trying to simply curry favor or get them to message on their behalf. So building community around you is a strategy that, especially if you have a network perspective, can make a lot of sense because you can actually measure the ROI. You can measure something like density, a network metric, to see if your efforts are paying off, if you need that KPI to prove ROI. On the other hand, it does let you understand that building relationships around you essentially change the environment around you, and that might make your business goals easier to achieve.
Yeah. I think that's an excellent long-term perspective. And I think that's definitely the way that one should think about it. I also know that some people often have shorter-term perspectives. And so it might be worth just touching on, some of the shorter-term approaches as well, which is, things like remarketing. So, if you find a hashtag that is relevant to a particular organization, you analyze that, you find the central people in that hashtag, and you want a higher ROI on your remarketing spend for example, Twitter advertising, it's possible to identify those people and remarket to them.
Yeah, we have a feature we call a smart tweet. And in that, and some of that data passes through to Polynode as well, but a smart tweet basically is addressed to one of the most central people. And it is built around the idea that you should talk to an influential person, most likely about something they already care about. And so if you're trying to introduce yourself to a powerful person, you probably talk to them about what they already are thinking about. To foster that, we do a text analysis of the content associated with each vertex. And the vertices that are highly central, we will present you with the words and the hashtags that they have high salience scores, or there's something called TF-IDF. Basically, they're words and hashtags that are special to that person. And we suggest you use those words or hashtags in a sentence when you introduce yourself to that important person. You're going to essentially try to start a conversation with the important person about things they find important. A few tweets later, if you can get a conversation going, it's probably a good idea to mention your hashtag and your URL. But that's the way to really amplify a message. It's to get the attention and build a relationship with the mayor of these topics. We like to say that it's often a good trade to give up 300,000 followers for 300 if they were the 300 that really, really mattered. And the tricky question is, well, how do you know who matters? And the answer is networks.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So we've got a couple of other questions here. I might just take one of these quickly. From FS. Did you already demo the surveys feature? No, did not demo the surveys feature for this webinar. Just wanted to focus on the networks piece. If you have an interest in the surveys feature, I think there's quite a few tutorial videos online, and maybe just send an email to info@polynode.com, and we can chat about that offline. So that's that question. And are you able to share some links to organizations who are using NodeXL or Polynode effectively and show their use in blogs and or websites? So Daniel, I'll let Mark answer that from NodeXL's perspective. There's a few case studies. So particularly on the organizational network analysis side of things, Polynode has been working with a number of organizations on organizational network analysis applications for a few years now. Typically, we tend not to publish that kind of stuff as a blog, but there's some interesting case studies that I can share with you on that. So if you want to send an email to info@polynode.com, then there's definitely some case studies on the organizational network analysis piece. And there's also, of course, quite a few public networks, as I would have shown you, in terms of being able to look at how people have used Polynode, for a bunch of different interesting use cases like ecological networks. And there's a user who's used it for mapping the board of directors for New Zealand listed companies. So all kinds of interesting use cases that you'll find under the Discover tab in Polynode as well. So there's a couple of helpful sources for you as well. Anything from you on that one, Mark?
Oh, yeah. So I guess one case is the Global Investigative Journalism Network, the GIJN. They have been publishing a weekly network map and report of the hashtag DDJ. That's data-driven journalism. And that map has allowed their community to essentially see itself. They are the DDJ community, and they now get essentially a weekly aerial photograph of their own engagement. They know what hashtags are most active. They know, more importantly, the divisions or neighborhoods. They're not so much in opposition to each other as just have different subtopics of interest. And each of those is very visible. So if you go to Twitter and you search for DDJ and NodeXL, I think you'll see it pop up pretty much every week. But that's in some ways the tip of the iceberg, because that's journalists using NodeXL to do journalism on journalism. But many journalists are now using this tool to point at topics that essentially are now part of the beat. Many journalists now have to cover social media as part of the topic they cover, in part because that's where public reaction takes place. And so having reporters take a network analysis tool and point it at the hashtag of interest, the newsworthy topic of the day, helps them see the relative proportion of different interest and opinion communities. It's very easy in social media for a small group to create a big noise, and for a big group to be comparatively quiet. And so in a network visualization of a controversial topic, it's possible to really see the population size separate from the message volume. Because in many of our network maps, the dot represents a person who generates messages, not a particular message. You can do that. That's a different network. It tends to look like a tree. It's not really a cyclic graph. It doesn't go around in circles much. So these network maps, and you can see many of them at the Node Excel Graph Gallery for topics of controversial or newsworthy interest, they can really reveal some of the range of opinion out there in the public opinion space. They also help size that opinion community maybe more appropriately than you can with search engine tools that are swayed by the volume of messages, not just the volume of people. So I hope that addresses that question.
We got another one here from Daniel. Can you talk about how you capture data from Facebook and LinkedIn? Is it via hashtags or something else? So I can talk a little bit about LinkedIn. So LinkedIn, as you may or may not know, is definitely one of the more closed social networks. So up until a couple of years ago, you could do some interesting things with their API, but they've since closed that. There's still some things that one can do in terms of if you have a group. So for example, if you have a group of sales representatives in a company, and that group is amenable to exporting their contacts, what you can do is combine those CSV exports of LinkedIn contacts into a single network and examine those networks as a unified, those contacts as a unified network using those CSV exports. But there's no kind of API or kind of easy way of getting accessing LinkedIn data, but there are still possibilities in terms of legitimate exports like that. I might let you take the Facebook one there, Mark, because I know you've got more experience with that.
Right, yeah, so LinkedIn is a challenge because no API to speak of really, but I do have some hope that LinkedIn will change, in part because last year Microsoft acquired LinkedIn, and so the business model may be a little different, and Microsoft does tend to build APIs around all of its services, so who knows. But to Facebook, Facebook is in its own way constrained. You used to be able to say to Facebook, give me my feed, give me my network. Tell me which of my friends is friends with my friends. And you can't anymore. Node Excel does give you access to Facebook, however, for fan pages and groups. Fan pages and groups, we can see who comments on various posts. We can collect all the posts, we can get all the comments, and we can get all the, quote, reactions. That would be the haha, the sad, the funny, the little smiley icons that you can click on underneath a post. And you can get a very interesting network from that. In fact, there's a couple of examples in my Polynode account of a Facebook group called Network Weaving, and it's possible to pull data out of network weaving and really see things very similar to what we see with hashtags in Twitter. We see relationships, we see hubs, we see subgroups, we see content vectors for those subgroups and so on. So if you're interested in a public Facebook fan page or a public Facebook group, you can get data. Sadly, Facebook no longer believes you own your network because after all, it's made out of everybody else but you. And so it's their property, and since they don't own their network either, nobody owns it. Who owns it then? You guessed it. It would be Mark Zuckerberg. Some Facebook insights are possible from fan pages and groups, not much from your own feed, sadly.
We got another one here for you, Mark. And I do know the answer to this one, but I'll let you answer it. In order to export data from Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, etc., into Node Excel, do you need to have a pro version?
Yes.
Correct. And I think it's also worth pointing out that for the integration, so you do need to have a pro version for Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, etc. But for a pro version, you do need to use the integration, so the export from Node Excel Pro to Polynode. You need to have a paid account in either, a paid account for both Polynode and Node Excel Pro. But it can be any type of of paid account. So, it's fine if you just have the public networks subscription in Polynode, for example. Daniel says, the SNA things I saw with LinkedIn limited the number of contacts to 500, not good when you have 2,000 friends. Yes, so I agree with you on that one, Daniel. I think what you're seeing there, I can't remember the name of it, Mark, you might know, but there's LinkedIn grandfathered. So I said that the API disappeared about 2 years ago, but they grandfathered one application and still gave them access to the API. But the old API had a limit of 500, so it rate limited you. But you could obviously take the 500 and then cycle through, so like step through a page through using the API. So it was possible to go beyond the 500. But I think there were a few additional kind of conditions, well, not with the web application that you're talking about, that was only ever limited to 500, but because of the API limit. Yeah, it's just, it's a grandfathering for that specific web application rather than a general availability of the API.
I do have one suggestion or a tip for how to get network data, not from LinkedIn, but I'll put this out and see if there's some interest. How do you get a network from a physical conference without buying expensive social network connection technology?
Bluetooth necklaces.
That's right. That's right. I've done this with a client recently with some success, and I'd like to share it. We had a conference with about 110 people, and the goal was to demonstrate that the effort to bring them together did, in fact, broker new connections. And so we did a survey prior to the event. We did a survey after the event, and we showed all of the 110 people, 109 other people's names. We asked them how much they knew that person. But at the event, we also had the organizers create very, very large name tags with very, very short lanyards. So that's the important combination: short lanyard, big name tag. And then we hired a photographer, and we instructed the photographer to focus particularly on pictures of two people talking to each other. Whenever you could find two people talking to each other, take that photo. About 1,500 photos resulted, and those photos were then handed to a human being, a graduate student, and they built edge lists from who spoke to whom. And of course, the photograph had a time stamp, so we actually had the time. And then we had information about each of those people from their prior survey responses. And the whole thing came together to show a near real-time emergent network of a physical gathering using just digital photography, some name tags, and short lanyards. So it's a way to do some of the analysis of who connects to who without trying to go out and buy expensive Bluetooth toys that almost never work.
Yeah, and that's, yeah, I like that idea. It's a good one. And Daniel, I think Daniel appreciates it as well. He's asked for, if you have any further information on that, to please share it.
Yeah, that there is something in my LinkedIn feed about it, and it was the data leadership community in British Columbia, the Vancouver Regional Development Authority, was very interested in facilitating this, and I believe those networks did show that bringing people together and encouraging them to interact is a way to build social capital, and that social capital is something that you can actually measure.
And I think it's worth, there's a couple of points there that I think are worth picking up on. The first is, I know no one's asked it yet, but it's a really common question about dynamic networks, so time varying networks. And you mentioned having the time that the photo was taken. Now Polynode does support the ability to filter by any data at all. You would have seen as I dragged that filter across, you saw that the nodes kind of disappear. and reappear in real time in front of you. So using that filtering, you can get a long way towards visualizing dynamic networks in Polynode by having timestamps, either in terms of years or minutes or whatever you want on the nodes and or edges, or you can have a range of times, like a start time and an end time, and use the filters in Polynode to examine how a network has evolved over time. So I think that's a question that people often ask. So just worth mentioning that. And another point that seems to be coming through in these questions is a real interest in organizations and external connections as well. And I know there was also a question on the surveys there, and we're not going to spend too much time on the surveys functionality. But of course, there's a lot of really powerful and flexible things you can do collecting relationship data from an organization externally using surveys. So there's the ability to use what's called a supplementary list in Polynode, where you can have, it could be, you could survey the people in an organization and ask them about, who are the people that they're connected with externally, whether that be clients or suppliers or whatever it might be. And for that, you can use a supplementary list, which can be a list of anything, right? So where you ask one group about their connections with another group. And so, yeah, there's a lot of things that one can do with the collection of that kind of external relationship data using surveys as well.
All right. Other questions?
I think we must have covered most things, man.
Yeah, I think so. Well, very good. We are always delighted to hear questions from potential users, and you can certainly find us in places like Twitter and Facebook, LinkedIn, and others. You've mentioned the info@Polynode email address. That's a good one. Let me share also the info@SMR Foundation as well. So that's info@smrfoundation.org.
And one thing that we wanted to do, so I mean, we spoke about this a fair bit, is being browser-based, you can share public networks. And so don't go to it right now, because we'll need to do it in the 5 minutes after this webinar. But we're planning to take that last network that Mark uploaded and create a bit.ly link. So you'll be able to navigate to this bit.ly link in the next 5 or 10 minutes or so. So bit.ly /Polynode Node XL demo. So maybe just write that down. You'll be able to navigate to that and just have a look at the same network. What I'll do is I'll do it for the first network that we examined together, because we spent more time on that one. So you'll be able to use kind of a lot of the functionality in Polynode, the publicly available functionality in Polynode, to examine the same network that we did. And I think it'll be helpful if you haven't used it before, just to experiment with the same data and have a look at it. Terrific. All right. Well, yeah, there's quite a few things there. Hopefully, everyone got a few things out of this. Mark and I are both really excited about the integration. We think that it adds a lot of potential things that you can do with network data, and we're excited to see how everyone uses it. So if you have any feedback or questions or anything like that, just feel free to get in touch.
Indeed. Thanks everybody for the time today and the interest in Polynode and Node XL integration. We in the network world really believe in connections, so thanks for being a link.
All right, thanks guys.
Take care.